Do you see that tower way off in the distance? You can go there. Or what about the Twin Peaks to the east? Yeah, you can go there too, as well as to the mountains behind them, and so on and so forth. In Breath of the Wild, if you can see it, you can get to it, and around it or over it. Literally nothing is off limits. Every house has a roof, every building an interior, every wall an opposite side, every river an opposing shore, every mountain a peak. You can explore it all. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild blows the doors off Zelda conventions and does something new at nearly every turn, being an open world, open-ended adventure. And that open-endedness extends far beyond just the geography of the world, but also permeates your every interaction with it. This is a game about options, both big and small. For instance, you'll often encounter enemy camps during your travels, and that's when you have to ask yourself how you're going to deal with it. Do you try and sneak up on them for a surprise attack? Or maybe you'll wait for nightfall and raid their camp as they sleep. Or perhaps you'll attack from afar by rolling bombs their way. Or maybe you'll use your Magnesis ability and grab a nearby metallic block and drop it right on top of them. Or maybe I should shut up because you get the idea. There are a ton of options at any given moment. Especially because by the time you depart the plateau a couple of hours into the game, you will already have almost every major ability, including gliding. Yeah, the game just hands you a toolbox and lets you go nuts, with abilities like creating bombs out of thin air, or flinging metal objects around, or temporarily freezing things in time with stasis. All three of which are a lot of fun to play with and open up a ton of options for enemy encounters and solving puzzles. Although there is a fourth ability too, Cryonis, which might have drawn the short straw in terms of fun, as it's the only one that isn't really enjoyable to use in and of itself, and I only ever used it when I absolutely had to. Okay, so with the world being so big and so open, it can be tough to figure out where to even start. Every corner of the map, and literally everything in between, invites the curious. What's on the other side of the Twin Peaks? What might be hidden in that valley far below? What lies beyond the walls of Hyrule Castle? Or at the top of that snowy peak? And you know what? Deciding where to go isn't even the tough part. It's staying on track that proved nearly impossible for me. On the way to any one objective, I'd almost certainly find at least a half dozen things begging for my attention, which then led to their own tangents, until I eventually wound up on nearly the opposite end of the world from where I meant to go. I was basically the dog from Up. Squirrel! And the best part is, I didn't mind, at all. In fact, I loved it. A world full of distractions, and I wanted to see them all. Which is why it's probably a good thing that there's a quest log this time too, which not only keeps track of your main quests, but every side quest too. And thank God, because there are a ton of side quests, which by the way are extremely varied and rarely repetitive, at least based on the ones I tried. So with the quest log, you can choose which task to focus on, and it'll mark the next primary location for it on your map. And it does this without ever coming across as overbearing. That's right, there are no annoying sidekick characters this time to make sure you stay on track. Yep, I'm looking right at you, Thief from Skyward Sword. You're completely free to ignore your primary objectives for as long as you want without consequence, and that's pretty cool. And if you choose to do so, it rarely feels like you're wasting your own time, because most everything else you can do will help you down the line, whether it's finding materials, cooking food, or seeking shrines. In fact, that's generally how I played. I mostly ignored the quest markers and just went wherever the wind took me, sometimes literally. It was an absolute joy to venture across fields, mountains, forests, and all kinds of landscapes just to see what was waiting for me around the next corner. It might be a small hut or an entire village, or perhaps an enemy stronghold, or maybe a shrine. Or heck, it just might be something really cool looking. For as big as the world is, I found no shortage of unique sights to behold. And at every turn, there's countless ways in which to go about the task. Do you trek to that distant mountain on foot? Or try and grab a wild horse to pick up the pace? Or do you climb up a nearby tower and try to glide to the mountain from there instead? And then once you reach the mountain, do you try and climb it from the base and risk running out of stamina? Or do you circumnavigate it to find a less direct route, but one of the spots to rest along the way? Or will you climb a tall structure nearby and glide to the mountain instead? Like I said, it's all about options. And that's what makes exploring so damn fun. And it doesn't hurt that the paraglider really helps in getting around while providing some magnificent views. Now those options become even more varied when you take into account how interactive the world is. You can cut down trees just for the heck of it if you want, but also specifically to drop onto enemies, or to use as a bridge across a chasm, or as a floating platform to cross a river. And speaking of destroying the environment, you can set fire to nearby grass to keep enemies at bay, and then use the updraft crates to take to the skies and escape with your paraglider. Or maybe you'll go on a bombing run instead. It really is all up to you. And even beyond that, the world feels alive in ways no Zelda game has before. Whether it's a varied wildlife you'll encounter in nearly every corner of the region, including bears, or the travelers and merchants you'll find wandering the wilderness. All of whom, by the way, react dynamically to what's happening around them, sometimes engaging in fights with the enemies themselves, or cowering in fear at an arrow aimed right at them. Yeah, they probably didn't enjoy their encounters with me as much as I did. The villages are especially impressive with how true to life they can feel, with nearly every individual having their own schedule. You can follow pretty much anyone from their house on their way to work, and then back again once their shift is done. Even the kids will return home once it's bedtime. Yeah, they're surprisingly responsible. And in a really neat touch, towns will even clear out in a heavy rainstorm as the villagers run inside for cover. And speaking of weather, it's changing constantly, to the point where the game even includes a forecast on the HUD. And that's a good thing too, as the weather can have a severe impact on how you play the game. Fog, for instance, will greatly reduce how far you can see, while rain will make every surface too slick to climb. And then there are the lightning storms that put Link at risk of being burned to a crisp if he has anything metallic equipped. Yeah, it's a cruel world, and it's a world that is changing constantly. And that's something you'll have to account for during your travels. But for as much exploring as I've done, surprisingly little of the world is truly required to visit in order to finish the game. Hell, I made it to the end of something like 3 regions not even filled in on my map. That's kind of nuts. But on the other hand, if you're not quite the exploring type, you can also just focus on your main objectives too, going point to point as marked on your quest log. But doing so will almost assuredly make the game much tougher, because in order to permanently upgrade Link's health and stamina, you're going to need to seek out at least some of the 100+ shrines scattered around the world. Now each shrine is essentially a bite-sized temple, taking me about 10 to 15 minutes on average, and they're almost always based around a handful of puzzles built around a single element, like redirecting airflow, stacking metal boxes, or moving energy orbs around. And I love them. They're just long enough to offer an isolated puzzling challenge, but quick enough that I didn't feel mentally drained afterward, even if some of them can be pretty tricky. I mean, just ask Roger's based on a constellation puzzle. And like the game itself, the puzzles are frequently open-ended too, such as this one where you have to tilt the entire platform to get the ball through the maze, which I actually solved by flipping the entire thing upside down for a flat surface and lobbing the ball off the end. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that wasn't intended, but it was pretty cool solving it all the same. Now, even though there are a ton of shrines, they're not always that easy to find, sometimes even requiring you to solve a puzzle just to reveal them. But the effort is usually well worth it, as the shrines essentially reward you twice. Once for finding it, as it then acts as a quick travel point, which is crucial in a world as big as this one, then again with a spirit orb for actually completing the trial within. And those spirit orbs are pretty crucial too, as you can trade 4 of them in at a God statue to upgrade your heart or stamina meters. So yeah, they're pretty important. Okay, now even though I just said that the shrines are essentially mini temples, they don't replace temples entirely, because they're still here too. Except this time, there's only 4 of them, and they work a bit differently than before, now primarily taking place within a single large structure and featuring elements they can manipulate on a global level that directly changes the temple's layout. I don't want to get too deep into it for fear of spoilers, but it is super cool, and it's something that Zelda games have only lightly dabbled with before. And I found most of the temples to be well designed and pretty easy to navigate, except for one which was a bit of a confusing mess. Unfortunately, I found the bosses at the end of each temple to be pretty underwhelming. The arenas that take place in are bland and aren't particularly well suited for combat, and the battles themselves lack the open-endedness and inventiveness of normal enemy encounters. And all of this applies to the final boss too. I actually much prefer the mini-bosses you encounter out in the fields, like this guy who'll rip trees right out of the ground to use as a weapon against you, requiring you to be resourceful yourself while taking the environment into account. Now that's awesome. But regardless of who or what you're fighting, keeping a properly stocked inventory is essential for all kinds of reasons, such as having ingredients on hand so you can cook food in order to restore your health and gain other benefits, like increased strength or a temporarily extended health meter. And then there's the fact that your weapons, shields, and bows will all break with extended use. And I use extended loosely, as though things really do break all the time, which means you'd better have a few spares on hand, otherwise you may find yourself totally unarmed. Now thankfully, there's rarely a shortage of weapons to go around, as you'll find all kinds of tools everywhere, lying around in towns, dropped by enemies, or inside treasure chests. In fact, there's almost too many, as my inventory was constantly bursting at the seams, which the game reminded me of over and over and over again with a message that pops up anytime I try to pick up a weapon that I didn't have room for. So to make space available, you need to access the inventory screen, page over to the pack section such as bows, and there can be a lot of pages to get through, find a weapon to discard, and then finally reopen the chest to collect the treasure. As a one-time thing, or even something that happened only seldomly, it would be no big deal, but I saw that message dozens and dozens of times. And that process began to get really tedious, especially for one who's a bit of a completionist, because every chest will remain active until you make room and retrieve its treasure. It's a little bit similar to the problem the Twilight Princess had with chests that contained rupees, only now with items. And it's almost just as annoying. The thing is, Nintendo could have easily fixed this too, such as by having an option to automatically discard your weakest or oldest weapon in favor of the new one. And unfortunately, my qualms of the inventory don't end there, because I spent way too much time on that stupid screen, whether to equip a weapon, shield, bow, arrows, or to find particular materials for crafting or cooking, or even just finding food to eat mid-battle. And it's those last two sections that are especially annoying, because there are so many materials and types of food that they're spread across multiple pages. Right now, I have 5 screens worth of materials and 3 more for food, and this not only makes it a nightmare to find a specific item, like say flint, but you also have to page through every single screen if you're trying to get to another section on the opposite side, such as weapons or armor. Now again, if this were something that happened seldomly, it wouldn't be a big deal, but as something I was accessing constantly over my 50 hours of playtime, I grew to detest it. It frequently interrupts and slows down the action as you try and find just the right weapon to equip or food to eat, oftentimes in quick succession thanks to the breakable items, which only compounds the problem. Now thankfully, the game does have a quick access option, with each direction on the D-pad allowing you to swap a different piece of equipment without having to access the main inventory screen. But this has issues all of its own too. For one, quick access lays everything out in a row, meaning you have to scroll past every item with a selected type to get to the one you want. And that's a problem that's only exacerbated as you add more inventory slots as you make your way through the game. And then there's the fact that, for whatever reason, the quick access menu barely takes up a third of the screen's width, meaning you can't even see most of it without scrolling through the entire thing. I have a giant widescreen TV, why can't it take up the full width of the display? Or better yet, why doesn't it lay them out in a radial fashion like in Skyward Sword, which would allow for more items to be displayed at once, while also solving the problem of having to scroll past everything, as you could just use a right stick to point to the item you want instead. And finally, because there are more inventory sections than there are directions on the D-pad, you'll have to remember to hold the right trigger in order to change the shortcuts for weapons and armor to bows and arrows, which is really easy to forget in the heat of battle, especially if your bow just broke. It's needlessly cumbersome. Look, I realize it may sound like I'm just nitpicking, but the inventory is something that you'll be accessing probably thousands of times, and the fact that it made it into the game in its current shape is shocking to me, especially given how polished most of the rest of the game is. And on that note, let's move on to the visuals, because Zelda Breath of the Wild can be absolutely breathtaking, in both big and small ways. Looking out from most any hilltop towards central Hyrule is just, wow. I definitely uttered holy shika more than a few times. The fact that you can see nearly the entire world from almost any mountain is complete bonkers. And then there are the smaller details, like how the sun reflects off the parting grass as you make your way through it, or the rolling clouds overhead. The fact that you can watch mountain shadows eat up the landscape with a setting sun. It's often jaw-droppingly gorgeous. From a distance, because it's when you get up close that some of the game's visual shortcomings become apparent. The mountain textures, for instance, clearly weren't optimized to be seen at arm's length, as they look rather flat and featureless up close. Indoor environments are also generally plain and bare bones. Although, to be fair, you can't enter and exit any building seamlessly without any loading screens, so it's an understandable trade-off. Also, while the game generally runs at a mostly smooth frame rate with occasional hiccups, there were several instances where it would really start to chug, and sometimes even grind to a complete halt for a few seconds, making me think that the game froze. Thankfully, those really were the exception, and the frame rate otherwise wasn't much of a problem, but those issues do rear their ugly head every now and then. Alright, so let's talk story for a minute, and don't worry, I'm going to be very careful here so as to avoid any spoilers. Okay, so Breath of the Wild is kinda weird in that while there's a lot of optional exposition, there isn't exactly a ton of depth to it. Their core story is actually incredibly simple, and any number of NPCs will tell you the same familiar details over and over again, just using slightly different words. And with how many people there are to talk to in general, there's a lot of text to get through. Now granted, you are free to ignore most of it if you want, but I'm the type that has to talk to nearly everyone, even if I'm not all that interested in what they have to say. And as a result, I found much of the dialogue a bit tiring to get through at times. Now, despite the ruined state of the world, the game lacks an overall sense of urgency. Sure, you know that Calamity Ganon is trying to come back, but beyond the opening cutscene, you barely hear from him again. Now of course, NPCs will occasionally make mention of him, but when they seem to be going about their daily lives just fine otherwise, it's a bit tough to get that invested in the supposed imminent threat. And while we're talking about the story, the game conveys major story moments through fully voiced cutscenes for the first time in the series' history. And while the voiceovers are passable for the most part, the voice work is definitely a bit uneven, bouncing between pretty decent to occasionally lifeless. To be fair, this may be more of a function of the script, as some of the characters are pretty bland, so it's perhaps not a surprise that the best voice work comes from the characters that exhibit an actual personality, for all of the 3 cutscenes or so that they're in. Finally, there's a matter of difficulty, because this game is tough, as in Zelda 1 tough. You're going to die a lot, but rarely unfairly so. This time around, the world really does feel brutal, as it should, which also makes the reward of finding shrines and expanding your health or stamina meaningful. as they will undoubtedly have a significant impact on your ability to withstand this world. Plus, the game autosaves frequently enough that you're rarely set too far back when you do die. Alright, so to wrap things up, Zelda Breath of the Wild is ultimately an adventure about discovery. One in which you blaze your own path and decide for yourself what's important to accomplish, and how you go about doing so. And it's that exact sense of discovery and freedom that makes Breath of the Wild such a breath of fresh air. It's just fun to explore and see what surprises await for you out in the world. Breath of the Wild really was surprising me constantly. Although, perhaps because of the game's more open-ended nature, those surprises are sometimes more fleeting moments as compared to the entire segments I remember fondly from past Zelda games. So overall, I like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild a lot. It's a liberating experience with Zelda standards, and one that guarantees everyone's voyage will be unique and truly their own. It's an adventure that's frequently brilliant and puts exploration and freedom back at the forefront, giving you true agency over your own adventure. While it may not be perfect, such as with it lacking story, uneven voice work, and everything about a stupid inventory, it otherwise provides a truly fun and unique experience while setting up an awesome foundation for Nintendo to build and improve on, and I can't wait to see where the series goes next. And with that, thanks for watching, and make sure to hit that subscribe button for more on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and everything else Nintendo too.